Salvete! I'm going to try to tell you all the Roman history you need to know for the National Latin exam as quickly as possible. I love the stories of Roman history, and I'm about to ruin them by not telling them. Because you don't need to know the whole story for the National Latin exam, just a handful of names and places and ideas. So jot down some notes, use this as a background to approach your practice questions, and if you're really interested in Roman history, go look at some real sources. This is just a crash course you can use to fake your way through the exam. So let's go through the eras. The monarchy goes from 753 to 510 BCE. This is the 7 kings of Rome, and they are all legendary. Then you have the Republic, which lasts from 509 to 27 BCE. This is a semi-representative form of government, more like an oligarchy. And then you have the Empire from 27 BCE to 476 CE, or at least that's the fall in the West. The East goes on a lot longer. This is ruled by empires, so basically a return to monarchy, even though they don't call it that. According to legend, Rome's seeds were laid by Aeneas fleeing falling Troy
with his father Anchises
and his son Iulus. They sailed to Italy, but first they stopped in Carthage, where Aeneas fell in love with Dido, and that did not end well. Then Aeneas in Italy founded Lavinium. His son Iulus founded a city called Alba Longa. Romulus and Remus were twin boys, and they were the grandsons of a king of Alba Longa, and sons of Mars, the god Mars, and Rhea Silvia, who was a Vestal virgin. Their uncle, who is the usurping king, think Lion King, tried to kill them by throwing them into the Tiber River, the river that runs right next to Rome. But they were rescued and nursed by a she-wolf. They argued over where to found Rome. There were 7 hills, and they each wanted a different hill. Romulus killed Remus, and so Rome was founded on the Palatine Hill on April 21st, 753 BC. Romulus kidnapped the Sabine women. Numa Pompilius focused on peace and on religion, and he had a relationship with a nymph named Egeria, who he said gave him all his good ideas. Tullus Hostilius was all about war, and he expanded the kingdom. Ancus Marcius was Numa's grandson because they wanted a return to peace. He had a bunch of war and then a bunch of peace. The 5th king was Tarquinius Priscus, also known as Tarquin I, and he kicks off the cycle of Etruscan kings. The last 3 kings of Rome are not Roman at all. They are Etruscan, from Etruria, which is modern-day Tuscany in northern Italy. After him was Servius Tullius, who might have started as a slave. He was destined to become king because when he was a boy, his head was on fire in the palace. And then Tarquinius Superbus, or Tarquin the Proud. He was the son of the first Tarquin, Tarquinius Priscus. He killed Servius Tullius, his predecessor. He was a very bad man. He was a tyrant, and he was overthrown, ending the monarchy and ending the line of Etruscan kings. The beginning of the Republic, you had Brutus and Collatinus, who were the 2 guys who overthrew Tarquin the Proud. That was as a result of the rape of Lucretia, who was the wife of Collatinus. There was war then with Tarquin, who was still alive, and with an ally of his, Lars Porsena, who was a king of Etruria. And then you have some heroes in that war. You had Horatius Cocles, who defended the bridge over the Tiber River single-handedly. You had Cloelia, who swam across the Tiber River in order to save herself and other hostages. And you had Mucius Scaevola, who, when face-to-face with Lars Porsena in his tent, burned off his own right hand in a show of strength. When the war ended, the Republic officially started, and so we need to go over the offices of the Republic. There were 2 consuls at a time, and the consul was the chief magistrate, much like a president, and they were limited to a 1-year term. There were many praetors at a time, and a praetor was more like a vice president. There was the aedile, who was in charge of public works, things like roads, bridges, baths, water, anything that the government keeps up for the benefit of the people. The quaestors were in charge of the law courts. The tribunes of the plebs represented the common people, and they had the power of veto. They could veto any act of any other magistrate. Dictators were appointed only in times of crisis, only in emergencies, and they would take over the job of both consuls and would be the one time when they would have one-man rule in the Republic. The censor was every 5 years. There would be a couple of censors. They would take the census, which also decided who was in what social class, which gave them enormous power. Then you had the senators, who were an advisory council to the consul. They just debated things. They started as a select group and eventually expanded to everyone who had ever held any of the other offices. So they became a very large body under the Republic. And politicians tended to fall into one of two factions. They tended to be either populares or optimates. Populares were politicians who appealed to the common people, and optimates appealed to established structures of power. They appealed to the existing oligarchy. And then you've got fasces, which are a symbol of absolute power in ancient Rome. Latin 1, that covers your test, so you guys can stop here and jump off and do some practice questions, or keep listening if you're interested. Under the Republic, we've got some important wars to talk about. In 390 BC was the invasion of the Gauls. The Gauls were fierce warriors in modern-day France, and they captured the city of Rome. They besieged the Romans on the Capitoline Hill, which was the most fortified part in Rome. At one point, the sacred geese of Juno warned the Romans of the invading Gauls. A famous general named Camillus, who had been exiled earlier, saved Rome from a complete disaster, though he did not win the war. The Romans wound up buying the peace with a lot of gold. And Brennus, the Gallic leader, had the famous quote, "Vae victis," which means "woe to the conquered," basically sucks to be you. The Punic Wars were a series of 3 wars that stretched from 246 to 146 BCE. It was Rome versus Carthage. Carthage was an empire in North Africa that was rivaling Rome at the time. The first Punic War was mostly a naval conflict. The second Punic War is the big famous one. That is featuring the general Hannibal, not to be confused with the famous cannibal. The Carthaginian general Hannibal had a famous moment sneaking over the Alps to crossing this giant mountain range to catch the Romans unaware. He used elephants in his army, which he wasn't the first to do that. That was Pyrrhus, but he was one of the famous ones who did it. He had his biggest victory at Cannae. It was the biggest Roman defeat, pretty much the biggest Roman defeat in their history, and a day of mourning for the Romans. But Scipio Africanus won the war and beat Hannibal at the Battle of Zama back in Africa. The Third Punic War, Carthage was not really much of a power anymore, so it was really just a slaughter of the Carthaginians. And Cato the Elder was a Roman figure at the time who was famous for ending every speech, no matter what the subject, with Carthago delenda est, which means Carthage must be destroyed. Some other famous figures from the Republic years, you have Cincinnatus, who was a dictator appointed for half a year, but he handed back his power after 15 days instead. He was a model of good dictatorship, and the model for George Washington, among others. He returned home to his plow. He left his plow to go be dictator and came back to his plow after 15 days. Appius Claudius, who built roads and aqueducts, especially the Via Appia, which was the biggest road of its time, and so was crowned the Queen of Roads, the Regina Viarum. The Gracchi, who were 2 brothers, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus, they were populares, and they tried to give land to plebeians, but they were murdered by the powerful optimates. Spartacus, who was an escaped gladiator who led a slave revolt, and he almost succeeded, but Pompey and Crassus defeated him. More on Pompey and Crassus in a couple slides. Cicero was the best lawyer and public speaker of his time, possibly of all time. He was named the Pater Patriae, father of the fatherland, for saving Rome, but he was later exiled because politics. And then we begin to destroy the Republic with some autocracy. Gaius Marius was a powerful general who reformed the army. He became absurdly powerful and was consul 7 times. Sulla was a rival of Marius's, and he eclipsed Marius after Marius's death. He marched his army on Rome to regain power, took Rome by military force, and had himself declared dictator. After Sulla's death, you had the Triumvirate, an alliance of 3 powerful men, Crassus, Pompey, and Caesar, who came together to rule Rome through extra-legal means. Crassus died in a military defeat in Parthia, leaving just Caesar and Pompey, who then turned on each other. Caesar had been leading an army conquering Gaul, and he also tried to take parts of Britain and Germany. But then Gaius Julius Caesar began to feud with Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, or Pompey. 49 BC, Caesar marched on Rome just like Sulla had before him and took it from Pompey by force. The famous quote from here is "Alia jacta est," the die has been cast, which was when Caesar was crossing the Rubicon River. The Rubicon River was the border between Rome and Gaul, and when he crossed that with his army, he was officially making civil war on Rome, and therefore after that you couldn't take it back. So both "Alia jacta est" and "crossing the Rubicon" are famous phrases meaning no coming back from this. 48 BC, Caesar defeated Pompey at Pharsalus, which is a town in Greece, and he was declared Dictator Perpetuus, dictator forever. On March 15th, or the Ides of March, 44 BC, Caesar was stabbed by senators, including Brutus, a different Brutus from the Brutus from before. After this, the second triumvirate formed, which was Octavian, who was the heir of Caesar and his great-nephew, Marcus Antonius, or Mark Antony, Caesar's right-hand man, and Lepidus, who doesn't matter. The triumvirate defeated Caesar's assassins at Philippi, then turned on each other. Octavian defeated Antony and Cleopatra at the Battle of Actium. It was a naval battle, and it was near Greece in 31 BCE. Took Egypt as a province after that because of the death of Cleopatra, its last queen. And Octavian was declared Augustus, who was the first emperor, 27 BCE. Latin 2, that is the end of what is covered on your test, so you can stop here. Everyone else, keep going. For the empire, you start with the Julio-Claudians, which is 27 BCE to 69 CE. Augustus, formerly Octavian, he started the Pax Romana, or Roman peace. This was an era of internal peace, meaning no civil wars during this time. He had a wife and advisor named Livia, a military advisor named Agrippa, a cultural advisor named Maecenas. He had to exile his daughter Julia and the great poet Ovid over his new adultery laws, probably not in the same incident. And he famously said, "I found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble." Humble guy. Tiberius was mediocre. Caligula was a megalomaniac. Claudius was weak and controlled by others, but he did conquer Britain. Nero was horrible, and you will often be asked about the Great Fire of 64 CE. Nero built a palace on the ruins of that great fire and blamed Christians for the mess and persecuted them. Latin 3, that's the end of what is on your test. Everyone else, we need some more emperors. The Flavians lasted from 69 to 96 CE. This was started by Vespasian, who was the winner in a bloody civil war known as the Year of the Four Emperors. He was the father of the other two Flavian emperors, first Titus and then Domitian. The Flavians built the Colosseum. Vespasian started it. Titus opened it. The Flavians harshly put down a Jewish rebellion and destroyed the Temple of Jerusalem. And in 79 CE, Pompeii and Herculaneum were destroyed by Mount Vesuvius. This was during Titus's reign, but we can't blame him for it. Then there were the 5 good emperors from 96 to 192 CE. They started with Nerva, then they went to Trajan, the military emperor. He had the largest size of the empire under him, and so we remember Trajan as having the biggest pecs and the biggest empire. Hadrian was a lover of Greece, art, architecture, and beards. He brought back the beard. He founded Hadrian's Wall as the northern border of Roman Britain. Then you had Antoninus Pius and Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius was known as the philosopher emperor. In the later empire, you have Diocletian, who divided the empire into the eastern and western sides in 286 CE. You had Constantine from 306 to 337 CE. That's his reign, not his life. He was the first Christian emperor, so sort of changed everything, and he founded Constantinople as an eastern capital for the empire. 476 CE was the fall of the Western Roman Empire, but the Eastern Roman Empire went all the way until the fall of Constantinople in 1453 CE, so another 1,000 years. And that's the whole shebang. Study well. Good luck on your National Latin exam.